So, welcome everyone to the Account Security and Protecting Your Data live event with Nathan Miller, our president and founder. I want to thank everyone for coming here today. On this webinar, we have Nathan and myself for us to go over some of the account security updates that have been coming out that you might have seen notices about, and really focus on steps that you can take to protect yourself online, including your data and your funds. So I'm Casey. I've been with Rentec for 9 years. I'm one of the writers and on the research team. So you might have seen my name pop up on the blog articles. I also write for lots of industry related websites. I'm also a real estate investor and a landlord. So I know lots about property management. I've worked with renters over the years. And I really love sharing my knowledge with our Rentec Direct clients and with everyone across the industry. And I'm going to pass it over to Nathan to give a brief introduction as well.
Great. Hello. So Nathan Miller. I started Rentec Direct about 16 years ago. I was the original developer, kind of the sole only guy working on it for quite a while. But as things progressed over the years, I've worn a lot of hats, do a lot of things. But really, what I have a passion for is when I'm able to do development and work on security. Those are the things I really love doing.
So again, we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Just to go over a brief agenda and the format for our event, we're going to focus this as like a Q&A style interview with Nathan since he is our security expert. He's been working in that capacity for a long time. We're going to talk about phishing websites, identifying red flags when you're online, safeguards that you can take against online threats, and then really look at what Rentec Direct does to protect our clients' data. And also, we want people to ask their questions during this event. There'll be time at the end for Nathan to respond to those questions. And you'll be able to ask those questions. If you look at the bottom right hand of your screen, there should be a little icon that says questions. If you click on that, you can ask the questions. I'll be monitoring those questions. We also have Shay, one of Rentec Direct's product advisors, behind the scenes helping organize those questions as they come in. And as a reminder, we are recording this webinar, so if you will get an emailed link that allows you to watch the webinar, we'll also probably save a copy and put it up on one of our blog articles. And then if you have any other specific questions or if you think of something after the event, you are welcome to email these questions into nathan-success@rentecdirect.com, and that will go directly to Nathan for him to respond to. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a little bit so you can really focus on Nathan and myself as I ask these questions and Nathan provides the answers. Okay, Nathan. So we know you created Rentec Direct and are still involved in the back end as a developer, but will you give us a brief rundown of what your job duties include at Rentec?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I wear a lot of hats. I did start the company, and I used to do everything, and through that time, I've worked my way to um, just doing a little bit of everything related to personnel, related to development, related to just operations, and but where I spend the most of my time and what I enjoy the most doing is managing our development department, and that is for any bug fixes, any feature requests, any security issues. I'm directly involved with all those, and before anything gets released out to our clients, I see it and I touch it. I make sure it works correctly. So right now, working in with the developers and making sure that our products are perfect before they go out or as perfect as possible, and that security is always a top consideration are the things I spend the bulk of my time on.
So when we think about security, why is system security so important to you? And what's your background in internet security?
Yeah, so let's see. I started actively being on the internet back in 1994. And to give some context, the World Wide Web, what most people think of as the internet, came about in 1993. So I was right after that. Hopefully everyone's looking at me and they're like, he can't be, he's not that old, right? um, but I've spent 15 years working in the internet with internet service providers and hosting providers, actively providing internet service and providing those connections and making sure all those sites, which amounted to thousands of sites over the years, maintain secure and high performance. So I did that for about 15 years until I started Rentec Direct 16 years ago now. And I took all that experience, brought that all into Rentec. I'm able to like focus all that into one application to make sure that one application is amazing.
So, as we can continue talking about security, one of the reasons that we're even having this webinar is because of the threats online. And it feels like hackers are getting more sophisticated these days. Can you tell us more about that and what to look out for?
Yeah, it's very true. They are getting more sophisticated. And the good old days were when all you had to do is keep an eye on your email box and not click on phishing links in your email. That's what for years and years and years what we've always been on the lookout for. And our banks have told us this. They send us. I just got probably 3 or 4 of them this morning, reminders from banks and other services like, don't click on emails that aren't from us. Here's how you identify them. That was the traditional method of phishing, and a lot of us know about that now, and we've gotten better at identifying it. But hackers are getting more sophisticated, and they're not just using email anymore. We've seen them using Google Ads, for example, where they buy a Google ad for a company that they want to get logins from, and they pay Google to put that ad up at the very top of the search results. And we all know Google kind of, the sponsored ads look just like the regular ads, so it tricks a lot of people. A lot of people will click the ad instead of the actual website link, but unfortunately, that sends them to, a bad website instead of the real website that they're after. Um, Another one is just phone calls. You might get a phone call where someone's pretending to be from the company. Um, and then one I was just reading about this morning. It's brand new, and I'm still learning about it. But there's a program out there called Evil Proxy. To learn more about it, Google it. There's a ton of articles out there this morning about it. But this is a program which has successfully helped hackers get into Apple iCloud accounts, Facebook, Google accounts, Dropbox, Microsoft, Twitter. There's a list of like 30 or 40 like really popular services that this one program that just came out has already helped people get into. So they're adapting, and we have to adapt also. Um, the other thing that is becoming more common is various forms of like social engineering. It's people are being coerced into giving their login information, and they don't think they're doing anything wrong or see the problem with it.
So, you mentioned social engineering just now. What exactly does that look like?
That's kind of the basic principle. That is where somebody convinces someone else to give them their login information. And a classic case of it might be, we'll use Rentec as an example, is one of our customers might get a call from someone claiming to be a Rentec support person. And, that, they sound legitimate. They've practiced this probably hundreds of times, and they call and they're just saying, hey, we're just updating the security of your account. We need to make sure that you are you. We're going to send you a code from us just to let you know that this, just so we can confirm your identity. So just let me know what that code is when you get it, and then we'll have your account all set up. And then this bad person who's doing it, they're logging in with your account. They're having Rentec send you this two-factor code. You're giving them the code, and they effectively then have access to your account. So that's kind of a way that social engineering's done over the phone. But that can also happen by email, text message. You see it on social media platforms through their messaging platforms. It can happen anywhere.
Well, it sounds pretty intimidating to think of all the different ways that these bad guys or hackers are trying to get into different types of accounts when we're doing so much work online these days. So, when it comes to actually trying to protect ourselves, what are steps we can take to stay safe?
Yeah, there's now these are going to apply for everything. This isn't just Rentec specific. This applies for any online access, but just some basic things that you have to do. You can't skip any of these. you have to keep your operating system and your browsers up to date. And I ran across someone running Windows 7 the other day, and Windows 7 expired in 2000. It was over 3 years ago that there's been no security updates provided to anyone on Windows 7. So if you're on Windows 7, you might have someone in your system, or there might be a virus or a problem with your system, and you'll have no idea because Microsoft isn't giving security updates anymore to notify you or to prevent that from happening. So the minimum Windows right now is Windows 10. Really, you should just stay up to date with whatever the latest is. I like to give them a few months to mature before I get to them, but right now Windows 11 is the latest, and it's mature enough for everyone to be using. For those running Apple devices, Mac OS, I think 12 is the minimum you need to be on today. I think 11 is just about to be end of life in a couple months, so 12 is the place to be. Um, you also need to keep track of your security updates on your operating system. All the major operating systems give out security updates. Usually it's weekly, but sometimes it happens really quick. There's problems, there's security exploits coming out for operating systems all the time. You might have heard of the term zero-day exploits. And when that happens, sometimes the operating system will send out an update right away. And if you don't install it, that means you're vulnerable to that exploit. And an exploit means someone being able to get into your computer until you apply that patch. So applying them as soon as possible is a great idea. And the same applies for browsers. You need to, whatever browser you're using, popular ones, being Chrome, Firefox, Edge, they all come out with updates, and most of them automatically update. All you have to do is click the button. And we don't like to do it. I don't like to do it because it closes all your tabs, and then you have to figure out what you were doing and get back to all the places again. But it's really important because your browser is like your first line of defense between you and the internet. And modern browsers do have a lot of defenses in them to help protect you while you're online. So that's from an operating system and browser perspective. Now, with applications that you use online, like Rentec Direct, the best thing you can do is activate two-factor authentication. And anyone not familiar with two-factor authentication is once you log in, you're asked for a second form of identity. And we began offering, text message two-factor authentication back in 2014. Fun fact, we were the first property management software company to do it. Lots of people use it. And we've been, for about the past 3 years, we've had a pop-up when you log in. If you have a merchant account connected to your system, your login, then we've had a pop-up that says, hey, you're dealing with financial data. We would really suggest that you activate two-factor authentication to secure your account. We've been doing that for about 3 years, and just recently we flipped that over to a requirement just to add that extra level of security and meet industry compliance, which requires a second factor of authentication for any financial activity.
So when we talk about two-factor authentication, I've heard terms like two-factor, multi-factor. What are some of the different ways that people can use two-factor? Passkeys, text messages, anything else? Can you elaborate on both of those, please?
Yeah, so text message is kind of the classic one. It's been around for a long time. We've offered it since 2014, and that is where you log in and then you're prompted for a code that we text to your cell phone. It's usually like a 6-digit code. You receive that code, you type it in, and then you get access to the system. That proves that you're you, because it's very unlikely that anyone else is holding your phone at that particular moment and able to get that same text message. So that's been a very reliable two-factor method for many years. Huge benefit of it is pretty much everyone has a cell phone, and it's really easy to set up. The primary drawback to that one is it is possible to be intercepted. There's been extremely rare cases where people have intercepted cellular traffic and been able to actually see the messages as they come through. That's pretty rare, but more commonly is phishing and social engineering attempts that get that code from you after you've received it. And you might not even know what's happening because there's like that proxy, that evil proxy service I mentioned earlier, is one of those services which kind of secretly intercept that data on the way through. So it's still a very good method to activate it if it's the only one you have. But passkeys are the new way to do multi-factor authentication. It's the most secure possible way to protect your account. And that works. It's a physical key, and only you have that physical key. And it's sorry, lost it. That key is the most secure possible way to access your account. The only drawback to it is you might lose the key or you might forget it. So you might be trying to log into Rentec on vacation, but you left your key at home or something like that. And as long as you remember and have that key, you attach it to your key ring or you put it in your wallet or something like that, that's a solid way to not have that drawback happen.
So you're saying key for the pass key, and in my mind, I'm thinking like a key that unlocks a door. Do you have one that you can show everyone what it looks like?
Yeah. Yeah, here's the one I plugged into my computer this morning. It's a Yubico key, and I'll put it up here again. It's a USB key, and what happens when you're signing in is you have to have this in your computer, and it has a code in it that's beyond me. But when you sign in, it makes you push the button, and the reason that's so secure is nobody outside of you right here with the key can push that button. Even if now this is today's technology, I can't speak to what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years, but today there's no possible way for a hacker to, even if they intercepted and they're connected onto your computer, they still can't push the button. So that's what makes it so secure.
So we might save some of these questions for the end, but one just came in on this topic of where do you find a key like the one that you just showed us?
Yeah, those are readily available. Amazon, if you have an Amazon account, just go search for Yubico, Yubico, I think is how it's spelled. That's probably the most popular key. But then there's a few other brands out there. I've also used ones called Thetis, Thetis. They're both very good keys. Yubico also has a website. You can order it from them there.
And I know on the knowledge base article that we just published on Passkeys, if you go to the Rentec Direct knowledge base and search Passkeys, Nathan shared his recommendations for probably the same link to the Ubico one and the Thetis one. So thanks for answering some of those questions, and I see more questions coming in. So again, if they haven't been answered yet, we'll have some time at the end to go over some of those questions. So thanks for your patience. I'm actually going to switch gears a little bit to talk about Rentec Direct specifically and some of these how you can implement some of these recommendations Nathan has given to the Rentec Direct software. So 1 second while I share my screen again, because Nathan prepared some screenshots for us to talk about some of these examples. Okay. So Nathan, if you mentioned phishing sites earlier, I know you have an example of some phishing sites. So if you want to explain what people are seeing on their screen right now.
Yeah, well, I'll give everyone just a second to let this sink in. But if you look at these two examples of our login page, can you tell any difference between them? Does anything look different or out of place? The thing is there probably isn't anything out of place because the one on the left is the fake one, the one on the right is the real one. And what this particular phishing site did is they just went and they copied our login page. And you can go up to any website, anyone with a small amount of web knowledge can go up to any website, copy the code that creates that website, and just put it somewhere else. And then they can change the links. So, for example, on the left one, which is the bad one, those links go to their phishing page. On the right one, they go to our actual legitimate login page. So it's very, very difficult to tell from the content of a web page which one is real and which one is not. Go ahead and click over to the next one if you would. Okay, so now on this slide, the same two login pages, I'm just adding the address bar from the browser. And if you look at those address bars really quick, they both have a lock, must mean they're secure, right? But it doesn't. What's happening is both pages are encrypted, but the left one's encrypted by the bad guy, the right one's encrypted by the good guys. If you look really closely on the address of the last one, between the C and the D on Rentec Direct, they slipped an I in there. And it's barely noticeable unless you go in your head and you spell out every letter. But that's where this phishing page went to, was this other domain that isn't owned by us. And it could be, this one looks very similar to rentecdirect.com, but it could be, rentecdirect.co or rentec.co or rentecdirect.net or something like that that's not rentecdirect.com. And if it's not rentecdirect.com, it's not us, and definitely shouldn't continue. So go ahead and click up to the next one.
I do have a question just on this one. So like you said, it could be rentecdirect.co or something that isn't our actual website. What are some red flags that people can look out for that might indicate that you're on a phishing website when they look similarly at first glance?
Yeah, and this is relevant, still semi-relevant today, but it's getting hackers are getting better at what they do. But things you can look out for would be misspellings, long delays, like our login page loads really fast. If it loads kind of slow, that could be an issue. If you see it redirecting, which from a browser's perspective, that's going to look like it loads and then flashes somewhere else, and that's just not typical. Um, Another big one actually is if you use Chrome or if you use any sort of a password manager and it normally puts in your username and password, if you go to our login page and it doesn't automatically populate with your username and password from your password manager, you're probably not at our login page, because password managers do pay attention to the domain and will only put it in the legitimate domain.
Thank you for that answer. Okay, let's get back to the slideshow. Thanks, Nathan.
So here's just another example. We were talking about how email is how phishing attempts used to happen, and now they're getting more clever. And in this case, they're using Google, and Google is unknowingly participating in the event by accepting money and posting an ad for the bad guys who are posting a phishing site. So this is another screenshot I took a while back of someone attempting to phish our customers, and the bad one is on the left and the good one's on the right. But at first glance, it's difficult to tell. If you go to Google and you type in Rentec, um, that first sponsored link is going to show up above the real link, because Google's always going to prioritize someone who's paying them versus the traditional link. So that shows up, and just the nature, human habit is to type something in and just click the first link. And if we've done that, 100 or 1,000 times, we almost just do it without even reading the content of the link. In this particular case, this one, any of our clients who clicked on this went to the wrong place. They didn't come to our website, even though it looked like our website. So it's just something to pay attention to. And a lesson in this is you really can't trust the results you're getting from any search engine. This was Google that did this, that put this up, and they're supposed to not allow this to happen, but they're reviewing tens of thousands, if not more, ad requests that go into their system every single day, and they're trying to do it as cheap as possible. And this one slipped through the cracks, and it can happen anytime, not just with Rentec, but this has happened. I was reading the other day, this has happened with over like 300 banks across the US. They've had Google's allowed phishing websites to post ads for banks. So it's just, you got to stay away from Google when you're trying to log into websites. All search engines, not just Google.
So how can we ensure that we're going to the correct login page to get to
Yeah,
like Rentec or your bank, so you are going to the right one?
yeah. For services you use frequently, like Rentec or your bank, type in their address and make sure you're really at their site by verifying that the URL in your address bar is the correct URL, and then bookmark it. And forevermore, use your bookmark to get to their site rather than taking the long way around by going and searching for it.
So let's talk a little bit about what Rentec Direct has done specifically. Nathan, I know you're one of the lead developers on a lot of these updates. Can you let everyone know some of the security features that we have that helps people protect themselves?
You bet. So two-factor is a big one. It's super important, and we've been promoting it for a long time. Now we require it if you happen to be dealing with financial transactions. So that's in there. We about a year ago, ish, we added passkey support because we want to lead the pack. We want to provide the most secure connection possible to all of our clients. So once again, we're the first software to provide passkey support in the property management industry, and it's again the most secure way to secure your account. Let's see. We also updated the back end of our system. So if you change your password, we're instantly going to log out all other devices. In a technical term, it's called a session, but we cancel all those sessions that were logged in previous to the password change. So if you if you gave your password to an employee or someone else, and you think they're still logging in and they shouldn't be, or if you think someone got your password, the best thing you can always do is log in. Make sure you go to the right site to log in, use your bookmark, and change your password right away, because that'll boot everyone else out. We also recently, this was just a few months ago, we partnered with another technology resource to compare the logins that all of our clients do with any compromised accounts on third-party systems. So what that means is if you use the same username and password on Rentec as you use in Gmail or Twitter or something like that, and if Gmail or Twitter or any other service that you use the same username and password on, let your password go, or they get compromised and your password ends up in the wrong people's hands, we're able to notify you that this password isn't good anymore. So and notify you to change it. So we started doing that. And then we also send out email notifications related to any suspicious or new activity on your account. And we have some examples of those. Okay. This first one is related to new logins. So every time you log into Rentec, we look at some characteristics of the login to see if you've logged in using this device before. And if you log in from a new location, for example, or a new computer, we're going to send you this email that you see right here. And it's going to tell you the login time, what browser and computer was accessing your account, the approximate location, that's going to be within like 50 to 100 miles ish, the internet service, and the IP address. And the reason we send this is so you're notified that there's a new login to your account, and you can look at this data to see if that matches something that you just did. And if you did, if you just logged in from somewhere near White City on Comcast, it's you can disregard the message. But if that looks suspicious, it's from you're logging in from New York and you're not in New York, something's up, and you probably need to log in right away and change your password. Okay, here's a very similar looking message, and this is related to, there's two security features in Rentec. One is you can block VPN access, and the other one is you can block international access. And if you have those blocked for your account, and anyone from an international connection or a VPN connection log into your account, you're going to get a notification that looks just like this. It's going to also tell you, the location, the IP address, maybe the service that they're using. And again, if that's not you, you know that they've been blocked, they haven't been able to log in, but they do know your login information. So you need to go up and change your password right away. All right, and here's a new one we did. So this is an email that goes out anytime your account has a vendor or an owner's ACH payment information updated. And we do that for those two particular types for a specific reason, because those are the only types of entities where you can send money, transfer money from your bank account to their bank account. That only works with owners and vendors through our system. And that's the most risky type of transactions, because that's money that's coming from your bank account and leaving your bank account going somewhere else. So if someone logs into your account, and this could be an ex-employee with bad intent, it could be someone who just isn't supposed to be logging into your account, it could be a bad guy, and they enter their account into a vendor or an owner and try to transfer money, you're going to get notified immediately right when the account is added. That way you can quickly identify that this shouldn't be happening. You can go in and look at the first line there, which says updating user, and that would be the user account that just did that action, and you can change the password or disable that account. Before we switch on that one, some things to look out for here is if you get a large sequence of these, you get a whole bunch of these emails all at once. That would be typical that someone might have got into your account and is adding a whole bunch of accounts in order to try to take money. So if you see a lot of these coming through, pay special attention, go in, change your password or the password of whichever user it says is making these changes, and then contact Rentec. If you just get one or two, also good to pay attention to them and just make sure that the information looks valid and the banking information is what you would expect to be connected to that particular account.
This ACH bank account email notification was one of my favorite recent updates that came out. I just think it's so valuable for someone to see right away if a new bank account has been added to their account, because that would trigger me to think like, huh, that's suspicious activity.
Yeah, and this kind of follows the banking industry. Not all banks do this, but I really appreciate it when my bank added this. If someone, well, when I go into my bank and if I set up a new payment vendor in my bank account for bill pay or Zelle, is the new transfer mechanism, it sends me an email that says, "Hey, something's been added." So this is kind of the same thing. It's to give you a heads up. I guess a word of caution on this is if you're adding a lot of accounts into Rentec, it's really easy to get email fatigue. You're getting a lot of these. You see them on a routine basis. It's pretty normal. Um, it's human nature to start ignoring them after a while, just because it gets a bit repetitious. But I just urge everybody to. This is an important notification that just needs to be paid attention to. So please always read them and look at them.
Thank you for that reminder, Nathan. So let's talk a little bit about managing subusers in Rentec Direct.
Yeah, I think that like the cardinal rule here is every individual person connecting to an account needs to have their own account. It's so important for so many reasons, but primarily the only way to successfully do two-factor authentication is for everyone to have their own account because they all need to have their own two-factor method. It defeats the whole point of that security if people are sharing, a passkey or sharing text messages, stuff like that. So. Um, it's very important. It's also an industry requirement. If you're doing ACH or credit card payments, it actually is required by the payment industry that you do this. So you're out of compliance with the payment industry if you're not. And then I feel like I had another really good point here on it. Oh, audit trails. If something happens in your system, we keep track of it all. Every time a transaction is edited, added, deleted, every time a payment comes in or goes out and it's recorded into the system, we record who did that. And you can look that up by opening up a transaction and looking at the edit history on it. And that way you know who did something if something did go wrong or there was a mistake, you know who made that mistake.
And so,
Uh, yeah,
so
go ahead.
you were saying everyone needs to have their own account, and I just want to clarify, you mean there's one primary account and then your employees and people working with you can get added as a sub-user. They don't need to go get their own Rentec Direct account.
Yes, excellent point. Yeah, you have, the owner of the account has their main account, which can then add more accounts, and every employee should have their own, we call them a sub-user account. And you go to settings, and I think it's managers and users is the place you do that. And good news, we allow an unlimited number of them. So if you have 2 employees, great. If you have 100 employees, they can all go in there. You don't get charged anything extra for that. There's an unlimited number available.
And will you touch base on the permission levels for sub-users? Can people do everything that a primary account holder can do, or are they limited in what their actions are?
Yeah, that's another huge benefit of adding sub-users is you can restrict their permissions to so they have access only to what they need. So just an example of that is if you're adding an employee and that employee doesn't need to see social security numbers, you can turn that off for them so they can't ever see them. You can also turn off payment access, or you can restrict access so one employee only has access to a certain subset of accounts. And that's really useful if you have a manager handling, one portfolio and a different manager handling a different portfolio. Is this manager shouldn't have access to this manager's data if they don't have a need for that. So you can restrict this manager to only have access to these properties. This one only has access to these properties, and that trickles down to all the tenants that are associated with them also.
Yeah, it sounds like those sub-users really provide that additional layer of account security as well.
Yeah, it's very important. And the system we built actually is it's very permissive or restrictive based on your business needs. So there's probably like 30 different options you can turn on or off for any particular sub user, so you can fine tune the control to exactly what they need to have access to.
Okay, and let's talk about account access while traveling.
Yeah, this you can see there's a screenshot down there of some security options, and if you ever go to change your password, you'll notice that these options are right down there. And these options can generally always be left off, but the only reason you might enable them is if you are going to be traveling internationally in the near future, and you're going to be outside of the country. You might be using a new device outside the country, so you may need to turn on this allow international option. Allow VPN is much less used today. 5+ years ago, before everything was encrypted with the lock and SSL encryption, VPNs were really common in order to encrypt your traffic, so people on like a public hotspot couldn't see what you're doing. It's much less an issue today because all websites are encrypted, so all your traffic is encrypted right from your device all the way to the end site, and no one can see that anyways. But if you still use a VPN for any particular purpose, and it's a public VPN, this is like services like NordVPN, or there's hundreds of them, but if you're using a public VPN service in order to connect back into the US while you're traveling, you may need to turn that on also. So those are just two security settings, which I recommend always leaving off unless you need them on. A benefit to leaving them off is if you have allow international turned off, that eliminates a huge threat. Most threats come from international IPs, so that knocks them off right off the bat. And if someone does try to connect to your account from an international IP, they get blocked, and you get that email notification we saw earlier, which kind of gives you a heads up. Now, caveat is those international bad guys, they can always connect in via a VPN or a proxy, which is kind of like a hidden secret VPN, usually via. It's a topic for another time, but it gets it makes the connection look as if it's coming from the U.S. So this isn't foolproof. It helps, and I recommend leaving them off.
So what about if for our clients who work with virtual assistants, who might be working internationally and or even just using some of the two-factor required devices? What advice do you have for people who use virtual assistants?
Yeah, virtual assistant generally is going to be someone overseas these days, and you're going to have that checkbox marked for them. Of course, your virtual assistant is going to have their own sub-user account, hopefully with permissions limited to only what they need access to, because you probably don't personally know this person. Um, so you'll need to check allow international. If you have a merchant account, they'll need to have a two-factor method, and the best two-factor method for international access would be a passkey. The text messaging doesn't always work super well internationally, just because all the hops that those texts have to get through before they get to that office in the Philippines or wherever. It may arrive too late for it to actually work. So I would recommend Passkeys for them.
And I know in the knowledge base article that we wrote about passkeys, it had a recommendation that if you're working with a virtual assistant, to have them talk. Usually, there's a tech support manager that virtual assistants work with, so they should know about how to set up passkeys. So if they have any questions about it, their tech support manager will be able to help and understand how to use a passkey to set it up to work within your Rentec Direct account. Okay, let's just kind of wrap up, Nathan, those things that you talked about of the best ways to stay secure with Rentec Direct.
Yeah, so enable two-factor on all your accounts. Every single Rentec account should have two-factor. Even if you don't have a merchant account and it's not enforced, I still recommend it because you have sensitive information in there. It's your accounting data, it's your tenants' information. That's still sensitive data that you need to protect, and two-factor is the best way to do that. Don't stop with just Rentec. Enable two-factor for everything, especially your email service, especially your banking platforms. It's just the best way to protect yourself. Be sure to set up all your employees with sub-user accounts. That's no matter what, even if you're sharing an account in the same household, it's a great idea to have two separate accounts for that audit trail, so two-factor works properly. And if it's if you're business partners and you both need full access, you can actually set up a sub-user account with full access, so there's no restriction there. Let's see, use a different password for Rentec Direct. And as you do other services, the easiest and most common way that people's accounts can get compromised is when they use the same username and password on multiple services. And how that happens is, I guess I'm picking on Twitter or X or whatever they're called today, but if they get compromised and give up your username and password, that means then they can also log into everywhere else that you've used the same username and password. So please always use a different one. Change your password immediately if there's any suspicious activity. That kicks anyone out of your system and secures your system right then and there. After you change your password, then you can move on to remedying the situation or contacting us. And then just contact us, contact our support team here at Rentec if you have any questions about this.
And so, what's the best way for people to find out information about security updates as they happen or changes to the software?
If there's any sort of event, an outage or a problem, we're going to post it on the summary page. We call it our message of the day, but we only do it maybe twice a year. So it's our semi-annual message. So if there's anything major going on that you need to know about immediately, we're going to post it right up there. It's right at the top of the summary page. But regarding system updates and security updates, our blog is a really great place to be. We have a product update section of the blog, which is going to show all of our product updates, which include all the security updates as well. And you can even go there. It's rentecdirect.com/blog. I believe you can even subscribe. You can get emails as soon as there's any new articles, so you're like right up to date with that.
Yeah, product update, major product updates are always written about, and every quarter on the blog, we do a quarterly recap of all the major updates that have happened and also kind of minor updates that maybe weren't worthy of like a full blog, but we always want to mention them. And then we did have a question come in that asked, what about tenants and owners for our clients? How do they find out about these updates or important news that might be relevant to them?
We don't have any direct communication with tenants or owners. We kind of do that on purpose because they're your customer, not ours. We don't want to be influencing them in any way that doesn't match your brand. So if there's any information that we're providing that you would like to share with either your owners or your tenants, please do. They of course are welcome to go to our blog. It's public. All that information is public, and probably, I don't know, maybe a third of the information is aimed at tenants.
Okay, and I want to kind of continue on with some of these questions that have come in throughout the webinar. So a couple people have asked this too. How do we keep track of various passwords? Is there a password manager tool, something that you recommend personally or that people on the Rentec team even like using?
Yeah, password managers are probably the most secure way to store your passwords. It's realistically, since you have a different password for every service, it's impossible to remember them. And most services require pretty secure passwords, which have umpteen different types of characters, and it has to be, long, and they're just impossible to remember. So a password manager is about the only way to go. I've used Chrome. Chrome does it. There's one called 1Password, which I know is pretty popular and pretty secure. A lot of people have used, not necessarily our employees, but I know LastPass was one of the biggest ones, although LastPass just had their own security breach not too long ago, so I'm hesitant to necessarily recommend them. I'm sure they fixed it by now, but even though having everything centralized in a location like that, like a password manager, seems risky. Statistically, it's much safer than using the same password on multiple services or just trying to remember them.
And what about if you lose your passkey or you lose your phone and you're not able to get into your Rentec Direct account? What should someone do?
I know that's I've just heard, listening to some of our conversations and success, that is a concern, and that's one of the concerns why some of our clients haven't set it up. Even though we've been suggesting it for years, and it's there's an easy answer for that. Is first off, sorry, I'm trying to think about how to do this one. So first off, if you're using a passkey, an easy solution is, instead of buying one passkey, buy two. That way, and you can set both of those up in Rentec. And if you use Gmail for your email, you can also use both of them for your two-factor with Gmail. Most other services work the same way. So that way, you always have a backup. It's just like a backup set of car keys. You lose your primary one, you can use your backup one, and you can use that backup one to get into Rentec, delete your missing key, and add another one down the road. Also, you could set up both types of two-factor authentication. So if you have a pass key and you lose your pass key, you can set up, if you have text messaging also set up, then that's your backup method to get in. And finally, if you lose everything, you lose your phone, you lose both of your pass keys, they're all gone. Just contact us. We'll help you get back into your account. What we need to do is verify your identity, make sure you really are you, and we'll get you back into your account. You won't be locked out forever.
Well, thanks for that reassurance. A couple other questions. It looks like we have time for some more. So let's say that I accidentally did go to a phishing website and someone got my username and passkey or password and they got into my account. What do I need to do besides change my password?
They could have got in and done anything, and we don't know what they're there for. So I think the best answer is change your password. Do that right away. It's the first thing you should do, and then just contact us. Get a hold of our team. We'll help you go through your account and see what they accessed and if they modified anything, and help you get it fixed.
Thank you. It's a part of the reasons we have those audit trails too. And simple question is, what's the difference between hacking versus phishing? Like when you hear about a website getting hacked versus a phishing attempt.
Yeah. We talked about LastPass a few minutes ago, how their system got hacked. Someone broke into LastPass and got all of LastPass's data. It happened to Equifax not too long ago, also, and It's happened to major companies. I think it's happened to a lot. Um, so that's where their website gets hacked and their data gets stolen. Phishing is more isolated and it's account specific. It's where the bad guy is trying to just get your login information and log into a service to retrieve information or use your account for some nefarious purpose. So it's kind of an isolated, they're both hacking, but phishing is usually an isolated to just the accounts who have given them their login credentials.
And another question is, there are insurance companies which offer cyber protection coverage. Do you have any recommendations?
There's, gosh, it's going to differ based on what type of services you're offering. Like us as a technology company is probably going to be purchasing a different policy than a property manager would. I don't know if I would necessarily, if these would be good solutions, but there's a company out there called Beasley. They offer policies, and I think the Hartford is another one that have cyber policies. A lot of property managers probably don't need a cyber policy, but it's a good idea to talk to your agent and see if it might be applicable to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that question that just came in. I think that could be a good topic for a blog article that we could write about too. Let's see if there are any other questions that we can touch base on. Okay, we have one more. do you support TOTP for two-factor? I don't even know what that acronym is. So if you could explain that, Nathan.
Sure. Yeah, TOTP is another form of two-factor authentication. I think it stands for time-based one-time passwords. So it's been around for a long time, and the first time I ever experienced it was with my bank at the time. Gave me a little brick. It was about so big, and it had numbers. Every like 30 seconds, the numbers would change. It was like pardon me, it was like 5 or 6 digits. And in order to log in, I'd have to put in my username, password, and then that code. And you have to time the code, perfectly with your login. It's a good method. It's very similar to text-based method where it's verifying that you are you because you're the only one that can have that device, and that number is unique to your device. No one else's device would ever be giving that number at the same time. It's actually gotten more accessible over the years, and now instead of having a physical device, you can have an app on your phone or an app on your computer that kind of does the same thing. And we very likely will also support that in the near future because it's a good alternative for someone who maybe doesn't have a reliable cellular service or something and can't do the text-based authentication, or for some reason passkeys aren't working for them also. So we want to have all those popular options available. Keep an eye out for that.
Okay, and then we have a question asking, for those of us that use Mac or Safari, is it safe to use the fingerprint option on the Mac?
I believe, and I'm not a Mac user, so I'm not exactly sure how they implement that, but I believe that fingerprint method is a version of a passkey. And the technical term for it, if you want to look it up after this, is it's called WebAuthn. If that is WebAuthn, then it is as secure as a passkey, and it's probably a good option. Yes.
Is that something that Rentec supports right now?
We support, we do support WebAuthn, which is how we implemented our passkey support. So very likely, yes. I've seen when we were deploying that, you don't have to use those security keys out there. There's other methods that accomplish the same passkey, pass the same passkey credentials. And one of them was the Apple's Face ID. So if you're logging in on an Apple device, you can do the Face ID instead. On Android, I think you can use the fingerprint sensor. So there are other options. They're just a little bit more complicated to get set up. So I usually just recommend, if you can't figure that out right away, just get one of these $25 passkeys because they're much easier to set up.
Excellent. And then a question about someone being hesitant to upgrade to Windows 10 because of complaints about it. Why would someone have to upgrade to the higher operating system or a Windows 10?
I'm probably one of those people that complain when a new operating system comes out. I'm like, no, I just got used to this one. So yeah, it is time consuming and challenging to upgrade an operating system. Windows, for example, Windows 7 is 3 years old now. It's not getting any security updates, but I talk to people all the time who are still using Windows 7. I was just doing a screen share with someone the other day. They had Windows 7. They were trying to upgrade their browser because it didn't even support the latest web technology. And the browsers won't even install on Windows 7 now. So it's very important for the security of everything that you do online. That's Rentec, that's banking, that's your email, and anything else you do online. If you aren't updating your system, you're just putting that data at risk. And so I just can't stress enough, you just have to do it. I have to tell myself this too, because I don't like upgrading. So I just force myself to do it. And I realize it's important enough.
Well, again, thank you, Nathan, for all of those answers. We just want to say a big thank you from all of us at Rentec. We really, really love our clients and love taking care of you. And that's one of the reasons, too, that security is so important to all of us. So thank you, Nathan, for all the valuable information that you shared. For those of you guys that attended, a copy of this recording will be emailed to you, and we'll share it on our Vimeo account and YouTube and put it on the blog, too. So thanks again for attending. And if you like this style style of webinar, the Q&A with Nathan. I'd love to hear your feedback. We have lots of brilliant people that work at Rentec who would love to share their ideas too. So let us know via that email that I shared, and we could potentially host more of these. So thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Nathan, and we want to wish you a wonderful day.